Bonjour et bienvenue à tous. Que Dieu vous bénisse dans le précieux nom de Jésus-Christ. Ce qui suit sont des informations qui m'apparaissent véridiques en rapport avec le retour de Jésus-Christ et l'enlèvement de son épouse. La vidéo ayant comme titre Halloween 2020 et le 17 de Eshvan 5781 sur cette chaîne mentionne que le 4 novembre cette année serait le 17 de Eshvan, suite à l'enseignement apporté par Pasteur Sandy sur la chaîne YouTube Soldiers for Christ Community Church. Voici maintenant un autre enseignement, cette fois d'un frère en Christ, toujours sur la chaîne YouTube, qui s'appelle Interrupts 165, qui montre que le 17 de Eshvan serait plutôt le 7 juin 2020, se basant sur le calendrier d'Enoch, et que le 17e jour du 7e mois serait le 7 novembre de cette année, qui tomberait sur la dernière journée de la fête des tabernacles. Le mot Aharat en hébreu dans le verset signifie « le fléau » ou encore « le désastre est renversé ». Vous pourrez trouver le lien de cette vidéo dans la case sous la vidéo. À cause de l'ampleur des informations données et le manque de temps pour vous les traduire, je n'ai pas eu d'autre choix que de mettre les sous-titres en français et vous partager des extraits. La traduction n'est pas parfaite, mais vous allez probablement comprendre, je l'espère, la majeure partie de l'enseignement. Sachez que cette vidéo a été mise en ligne le 26 octobre 2020. Ce que je vous conseille de faire si vous trouvez que tout va trop vite est de réduire la vitesse de la vidéo. Tout ce que vous avez à faire est d'aller dans les paramètres au bas de l'écran et changer la vitesse de lecture, parce qu'il parle vite et il est difficile de lire les sous-titres et à la fois regarder le fichier qu'il utilise. Je vous reviens dans environ 3/4 d'heure.
Just some things in review. We've taught this in our other videos, and I'm going to just kind of bring it back a little bit so we can refresh. And those who haven't seen it, at least they can maybe see it here for the first time. What I want to show is this Enoch calendar that we've made, and it's based on the moon movements and the sun movements. And I'm going to bring it up to the top here. And Amish and Mike did an excellent job on bringing this Enoch calendar together several months ago. And what it is, it's the Enoch calendar. And in this column, it's what we call the solar count. The solar, the sun, does a 364-day count from start to finish. And then the moon does a 354-day count in its rotation. So there's a 10-day difference. And the 10-day difference is noted as the 10 days of awe, as we've discussed before. What I want to point out is what we did on this calendar is in this column we have the Gregorian dates, the current dates, and in this column is what we call the messed up Hebrew calendar. This is the current calendar that they're using, but for our teachings and our purposes, we're going to be using the Enoch calendar. And the best way to look at the Enoch calendar is it's actually two calendars in one. There's the solar count, and then there's the lunar count. There's two counts on this calendar. Okay, so that's to clarify the questions that we've gotten from before for people asking how do we read the Enoch calendar. So there's two different counts, solar count and lunar count. What's happened, so everyone knows, is when we go down into the story of Noah, what we did was we said, okay, so we laid out the Enoch calendar. And once the Enoch calendar was laid out, we realized, okay, we have a story that must have been put on the Enoch calendar. And that story was given to us by Noah, because Noah had what? He had the calendar, the Enoch calendar. Enoch was his grandfather. Noah didn't have the Gregorian calendar right here. He didn't have the Hebrew calendar. He only had one calendar, and that was the Enoch calendar that his grandfather made. And so when you lay out the Noah story, you have to lay it out on the Enoch calendar, because that was the calendar that he kept. And so what date did this event start with Noah? Well, when you go down and read Genesis 7:11, he says that the flood started on the second month, 17th day. And that puts it right in the timeline of evening to evening, June 7th to June 8th. So right in this timeline is when the flood began. And that's where we've placed it on the calendar. But on our current timeline, this date would be between June 7th and June 8th. This is where the story would begin. And so Noah gave us a couple of counts. He gave us 2 counts of this 150 days. Well, when you go through the first count of 150 days, from the beginning of the story to where he says the story ends, we'll follow that through. Now, we know that it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, but the length of his story was 2 counts of 150 days. If you go through Genesis 7 and Genesis 8 properly, you'll see that he has 2 counts of 150 days and the 40 days. So let's go through the first count of 150 days. From day 1, let's count down in this column 150 days, and it brings us right here, the 150th day, and that date ends on November 4th, okay? But when you read further into Genesis 8:4, he gives us the final date of the 7th month, 17th day, when the ark rested. So this is when the ark rested, 7th month, 17th day. And so that's the day that Noah gave us. And what is that? The 153rd day. And it's really interesting that this came out to this time frame as the 153rd day, because I want to show you something else. So when he talks about that it was 40 days and 40 nights of rain, when we start from about this fall equinox time, okay, what does it say in Genesis 7:4? For yet 7 days, right? And the Lord shut them in. 7 days, the Lord shut them in. And then in verse Genesis 7:10, it says, and it came to pass after 7 days, the flood waters were upon the earth. So after the 7th day, when you count down now 40 days, right here, 40 days, it brings you to the exact same day that Noah says the flood ended and the waters were dried up on the earth. 7th month, 17th day. And that day is November the 7th. It's right here. It's an exact count to what Noah gave us. And so something else I wanted to point out to everybody is the other 150-day count. When we go to the other 150-day count, where in Genesis 7:24, he says the waters prevailed upon the earth, where did we get this 150 days from? I want to show you. The first 150 days started from when the Noah story actually started. So this is when the Noah story started, okay? But this other 150-day count that Noah gave us is coming from, is this 150 here? It's coming from the Enoch Calendar count from day 1. So when you go to the first day on the Enoch Calendar, this is the very first day, and that date was set to April 23rd, and Amish and Mike did a very good job on showing us in previous videos how the first day gets set by the book of Enoch. He shows us how to set the first date. And when you count from that first day on the Enoch calendar and you count down 150 days, and we'll go down that right now, the whole 150 days, it lands us exactly right about here, that 150-day count in Genesis 7:24, which says the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. What day is that? Well, on the wrong Hebrew calendar, that's their new year. On the Hebrew calendar, which they declare was their new year, and we know that according to the Enoch calendar, it's not, but that's the first 150th day. It happens to land on their New Year day. And then what happens? Noah gives us another 50-day count, his final 50-day count to where the ark rested. And when we go down that 50-day count in this next column, it ends exactly where it should end. 50 days, and Noah gave us this date. Remember in Genesis 8:4, Noah gave us this date, 7th month, 17th day, and it lands right here where the ark rested. So all the counts, every count from the Enoch calendar through the entire story of Noah, it brings us to this final day where the ark rested, and that'll be November 7th. And the interesting thing about that is it's also the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. We're going to show you how all that ties together. How the Feast of Tabernacles, right here, and the 7 days and the 8th day of Tabernacles is going to tie right in together of this day when the ark rested, November 7th, and how it'll flow through to the 7th month, 24th day that Daniel gave us. But I want to show you something really interesting too that came up when we got to this 153 days. And a lot of people picked up on this and they left comments about this. And it's true, and this was already on our calendar. So if you have a previous version on our calendar, we already pointed this out, that this 153rd day could also represent John 21:11 of the 153 fish that were caught, which is the 153rd day, which also represents the 153. And it says, all that were caught, they were escaped, and the net did not break. So Jesus lost none. And that's what Jesus tells us in John 6:39. And this is the Father's will which hath sent me, that all which he hath given me, I should lose nothing, but should raise it up again at the last day. So this is very significant, this last date that Noah gave us when the ark rested, which will be November the 7th. So something else too I want to show everybody, and then we're going to get into some of the main points of our calendar and how it all ties together. And I want to get into this, the Jubilee year that we're in now. Some people are saying, no, it's not a Jubilee year, and we've shown this a few times. Our sister Emma made this a Jubilee calendar, and what I want to show everyone is how it works. And we have this available. It's available for everyone to see and to look at. It's a calendar that marks different times and events. So it marks the destruction of the Second Temple. It marks when Herod refurbished the Second Temple. It also has a marking of when Jesus was born on 9/11, 3 BC. And it also has a marking of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, each one represents its own Jubilee. You can go 50-year counts from the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and it'll eventually bring you to a certain time frame. You see how it has 50, and then 50, and then 50, and then 50. This is keeping an accurate count of 50 years, every 50 years from the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ in 33 AD. And then also here, this is keeping an accurate count every 50 years. You see the 50 years, 50 years, 50 years. It's an accurate count of every 50 years from the time that Jesus Christ was born. And it's the same thing that we're doing up here. So I just want you to see the pattern that's going on. It's a fifth. So this count for the destruction of the temple, it'll go 50 years, 50 years, 50 years from the time the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. So you go 70 AD plus 50 years, plus 50 years, plus 50 years. And where does that time frame bring us to? It brings us to where we are right now. If you continually count 50 years from 70 AD, it brings you to precisely 2020. And right now, today, we are in fact in a 50th year of a Jubilee. And all you got to do is count from 70 AD and keep adding 50 years. And you'll see for yourself that every 50 years from 70 AD, it brings us to precisely 2020, and it ends up in a 50th year of a Jubilee. So I just wanted to be clear to everyone. There's been a lot of questions about that. And so I wanted to show this wonderful chart that was made by our sister Emma from Discord. She painstakingly put this together so everyone can review it and take a look at it. And it'll be the same thing here in 2033. This will be the 50th Jubilee now from the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So that count kept going, right? It was down here. So if you go 50 years, 50 years, 50 years, 50 years from the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, it'll be a 50th Jubilee in 2033 from his death and resurrection. So this calendar is keeping an accurate count of the different Jubilees. There's more than one Jubilee. You can have a Jubilee. A Jubilee is an anniversary. It's basically an anniversary date. So this is the anniversary date from the destruction of the temple, and this is an anniversary date from the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So in 2020, there's a Jubilee for the destruction of the temple, and in 2033, there's a Jubilee year for the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. I wanted to be clear why we're saying this is a Jubilee year. And if anyone wants to review this, it's attached to our spreadsheet, and we're going to attach our spreadsheet to our calendar so you can see how that all works out. Now I want to show you something that we've done before, and we had it on the videos with John and Dr. Barrial, but I want to show everybody here. So we showed prior that what's happened. The Jews have had on their own calendar, they've had different things on their dates, right? So they've had the New Year, the Feast of Trumpets, okay? Tishri 1 was September 19th. Tishri 10, the Day of Atonement, was September 28th. And Tabernacles was October 3rd. But these days have passed. We need to all understand, brothers and sisters, these days have passed. So the Lord cannot be using the Hebrew calendar. But what if? What if he truly, in fact, is using the Enoch calendar that we've all pointed out to everybody? The sun count for the Enoch calendar and the moon count. And if he is, then where does it place the true seventh month? Enoch told us, when Amish and Mike made the calendar, Enoch told us that after you've reached the 177th day, after that 177th day, begins the seventh month for the new year. And in this column, this is the Enoch count, right? We started it from the top. Let's keep track of that again, right? This is where we started it from, okay? This is the first day. This is day one. Enoch's 177-day count. And when you go down this column, it correctly and precisely ends exactly where Enoch told us it should end. The 177th day, and then the next day is the first day of the seventh month, which is the correct Tishri 1 according to the Enoch calendar. So that's where we are. And this is where we are right now, folks. We have now just passed Rosh Hashanah, the new year, which was October 17th, Tishri 1. Today is the seventh month, 10th day. It's the Day of Atonement. Today, as we speak right now, today is the Day of Atonement according to the Enoch calendar, October 26th. And what are we approaching? Well, October 31st, it's the Day of Tabernacles. And then when we get to November 9th, it's the seventh month, 24th day, where Daniel tells us that he saw Jesus Christ on earth. This is it right here. So we can look at this Enoch calendar and show that we have now precisely put the seventh month right now in real time as we're speaking right now. So what's happened so far? So let's see where we are. So we know that Rosh Hashanah, the new year, has passed as of October 17th. And we know that we're in the Day of Atonement right now as of today. Seventh month, 10th day, October 26th. So today is the Day of Atonement. So what are we expecting? Well, we're expecting the escape of the bride, right? So what can we show? Well, let's take a close look at this. We've been pointing to any one of these dates could be a viable date of escape, okay? And so now we know we are passing, and Israel is now passing the Day of Atonement in Israel as we're speaking right now. And we are now approaching October 31st, seventh month, 15th day. But what happens on this day? Something very interesting happens. Even though the moon count, see the moon here, the moon count, it's witnessing that this is seventh month, 10th day, the Day of Atonement. Okay. And then also the moon is witnessing that on October 31st, this is the seventh month, 15th day, the Day of Tabernacles. But once we laid this out, I realized I caught something that's happened. I want you all to focus in on this. Although the moon is testifying that this date, October 31st, it's testifying it's the seventh month, 15th day, Tabernacles. The sun count, the sun is testifying that this day is the seventh month, 10th day, which is the Day of Atonement. Isn't that shocking? We now have the Enoch calendar. Moon count is counting this day, October 31st, as the Day of Tabernacles, and the sun is testifying that this day is the correct Day of Atonement. And if this is true, brothers and sisters, if this is true, that the sun is testifying that this is the Day of Atonement, and this is the Day of Tabernacles, understand what Levitical law says. Leviticus 25 says that in a Jubilee year, which we just showed you that we are now in a Jubilee year, in a Jubilee year, Rosh Hashanah, the new year, has to be celebrated on the Day of Atonement. Where we thought this was the Day of Atonement, what if what's really going on is the sun is testifying this is the Day of Atonement? And if this is the true Day of Atonement, then Rosh Hashanah, by Levitical law, by God's law, by God's own law in Leviticus 25, you can read that. In a Jubilee year, the trumpets of Rosh Hashanah have to sound on the Day of Atonement, which the sun is testifying that this day, October 31st, is the Day of Atonement, and the moon is testifying that this is the Day of Tabernacles. So now we have all three. We have the Day of Trumpets, the New Year, the Day of Atonement, the Day of Tabernacles, all being celebrated or should be celebrated all on the exact same day, October 31st of this year. This is an absolute shock that we could have three feasts all on the same day. And that's possible only because the Enoch calendar has two counts. The sun count testifying its atonement and the moon count testifying that it's tabernacles in the same day. And since it's a Jubilee year, now Rosh Hashanah, the trumpets should be sounding on this same date. The date of atonement, the Day of Tabernacles. And what does Joel tell us? I'm going to just show you really quickly, and you guys can go look this up. If you go look up Joel 2:15, what does Joel tell us? He tells us it's a great and terrible day of the Lord. What if he's talking about the great day is tabernacles? Because what does he call tabernacles? He says, call a solemn assembly. And we know the solemn assembly is for tabernacles. And what does he say? He also says, proclaim a fast, he says. Day of Atonement. Is he mentioning two things for the same day? When you go to Joel 2:15, he says, proclaim a fast, call a solemn assembly. The fast we know is atonement. The solemn assembly we know is tabernacles. Joel 2:15 is clearly telling us it's the Day of Atonement and tabernacles. And when you go to Joel 2:15, he also starts off by saying, blow the trumpets in Zion. Blow the trumpets in Zion, he tells us. And where do we find that? Let's go to Joel 2:15. Let's take a quick look at that real quick. I want everyone to see this. He starts it off. Blow ye the trumpet in Zion and sound an alarm. Do you see what's going on? And what does he say here? He repeats it again. Blow ye the trumpet in Zion. This is trumpets. This is the Rosh Hashanah. Sanctify a fast. This is atonement. Gather the people. Sanctify a congregation. Assemble the elders. It's an assembly. So we have trumpets. The Day of Trumpets is the New Year's. We know that. And calling a fast. This is the Day of Atonement. And calling an assembly. This we know is tabernacles. And what is he saying? Let the bridegroom go forth of his chamber and the bride out of her closet. Boom. The escape. The bridegroom is coming. The bride goes out of her closet while the bridegroom is coming forth from his chamber. When? Trumpets, atonement, tabernacles. Exactly what we show on the calendar. When we go to the calendar, what are we showing all happening on the same day? Jubilee year, Rosh Hashanah, trumpets, and then atonement. The sun's declaring its atonement. And then the moon's declaring its tabernacles, the assembly, all on the same day, October 31st. Brothers and sisters, we're looking at this day, and I would like everyone to keep their eyes and ears open, keep in prayer, keep fast, keep in watch. This may in fact be the day of our escape, October 31st. And I'm calling this the convergence. This is absolutely a convergence. All three feast days in one. I've never heard of such a thing. I've never seen this happen before. It's an absolute convergence of all three feast days happening at once. Okay, moving on to something else here real quick. Let's move on to tabernacles. I want to show everybody how all this fits into tabernacles. So this very well could be the day of the escape. We're in this ministry agreeing that, yes, this is a very high watch date. Everybody keep your eyes and ears open, keep in prayer, keep in fast, keep watch. This is a very, very high watch date, October 31st, okay? But it's very possible, and I'll say this again, it's very possible that the escape may not happen until the great 8th day of Tabernacles. See, Tabernacles is here, and then it's 7 days to the end of Tabernacles, and then they have what they call the great 8th day. And I think I've showed this before in some of our prior videos, and but I'm going to do it for those who haven't seen it. So this is the Tabernacles on the current Hebrew calendar, but I just want to show you something. This is the 7 days right here. These are the 7 days of Tabernacles, and then it ends on a day that's the 8th day called Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. And what they do is they combine both of these 2 days into one day, into one festival. And here's what they call it. Let me move this down real quick. They call it the 8th day of assembly, okay? They combine both days and call it the 8th day of assembly. And right here they show it. They says the holidays of Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah are combined into a single day, and the names are used interchangeably. So these 2 days that we're pointing to, this date here and this date here, even though this is the wrong Hebrew calendar, when we place it on our calendar, it ends up between November 7th, right here, and November 8th. This is the great 8th day of the Feast of Tabernacles. So these are the 7 days and then the great 8th day combined right here. So yes, it is possible. If we pass this date for whatever reason, if we've passed October 31st, it's very possible that the escape could happen here at the 8th day. And that's also talked about in Luke 9:28, and we've gone over this before. You guys can read this. It talks about in 8 days where the Lord comes down from the mountain. And this story here, and we'll show it real quick, it is the time of Tabernacles. And we find that in Luke 9. And let me get into that right now. Let me move this out of the way. So we go into Luke 9, and it's 9:28. And there it is. And it came to pass about in 8 days after these sayings, he took Peter and John and James and went up to the mountain. So the Lord's going up to the mountain, which we believe is the mountain of the Lord up in heaven. And what are they talking about? And it talks about the time of Tabernacles. And as they departed from him, Peter said unto Jesus, Master, it is good for us to be here, and let us make 3 tabernacles. Okay. And what did we say that this word make means? We've talked about this in one of our prior teachings. It means to continue. It means to ordain, to perform, to fulfill, to keep, to continue, ordain. And ordain what? Watch this. This word tabernacle is what it really means. Let me dig down just one more definition. And it means specifically a wife. To ordain specifically a wife. And what's he talking about here? Why is he talking about to make, meaning ordain, 3 wives? Because there's 3 timelines that we teach in this ministry. There's a timeline of Luke, there's a timeline of Mark, and there's a timeline of Matthew. And he's talking about making and ordaining 3 wives. When? At the time of Tabernacles. And we're looking at the time of Tabernacles as we've just discussed now. This time of Tabernacles, we're looking for the escape of the bride. So the question is, does the bride escape here, which I really believe does happen? Or is it possible the bride escapes here at the end of Tabernacles? And yes, that's possible too. So we're not going to rule that out. Either the bride escapes at the first day of Tabernacles, like we just pointed to, the convergence date, October 31st, where all 3 feasts converge onto one day, or it's possible the bride escapes on the great 8th day at the end of Tabernacles. So that's something I want everyone to keep in mind. And we had some questions about the Songs of Solomon. The reason we have the Songs of Solomon here is because it's a verse by verse. Each verse counts as a day. And we've done some teachings on this before. When you go through the Songs of Solomon, and what do we have in the Songs of Solomon? It has 8 chapters, right? And if you go through each of these 8 chapters, it's almost a count of the days. And here on the 3rd day is the wedding, right? We get to the last chapter, And the King Solomon with crown, go forth, ye daughters of Zion, and behold, King Solomon with the crown wherewith his mother crowned him in the day of his espousals. This is a wedding day on the third day. And it goes on and on with the story until the eighth day. So it literally is a day-by-day count. And we've aligned this directly with the days of tabernacles. And so that's why we have it on this column here on our calendar, because it does, in fact, line up with a tabernacles event. And so that answers the questions of those who asked about why do we have the Songs of Solomon's lined up next to it here on this part of the calendar. Okay, so that was topic number 2. Now, here's something that we haven't taught. It's brand new, and it's kind of mind-blowing. And it's something that Jamie stumbled upon about a week ago, maybe a little bit longer. And we brought it into this teaching today because last time Jamie wasn't feeling too well, so we kind of prolonged it to teach it this time around. But Jamie's got a prior engagement that she has to attend this evening, so I'm going to go through it real quick with you guys. But it's so mind-blowing. It's something new that you've never seen before. And we're going to introduce it for the first time here today. And I just want to show everybody real quick. Let me get off of this screen. And let me get to the proper place here. It should be, give me just a second here to redo this. It should be up here. Let me see. Well, let me go to Daniel first. We'll probably start off in Daniel, probably the best place to start off. So let's go back to Daniel, and we'll go to Daniel 9. And we've talked about this before. You know, we're talking about accomplishing the 70 years and desolations of Jerusalem. You know, we've had this in our prior videos. If you want to see some of our other teachings on this 70 years and the desolations of Jerusalem, we've talked about that. But real quick, you know, maybe just for those who haven't seen something, I just want to show you real quick. What we're talking about is this. And I'll just bring it in real quick for those who haven't seen it in the prior videos, so you'll know what to look for if you do look at our other videos. What's happened is there's a prophecy of Daniel that has come true. And it's the prophecy in Daniel 9:2. And that prophecy, it says, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by the books the number of years whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, that the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. So he's saying that by the number of books, he understood the number of years to the desolations of Jerusalem. So we know there's 52 books in the books of Jeremiah, right? So when you go to the books of Jeremiah, and I'm going to try to blow this up so everyone can see it. Let me just make it a little bit bigger here. Okay, so what's happened? When did Jerusalem come back into the land of Israel? When did they reclaim Jerusalem? On June 7th, 1967, there was the 6-day war. Okay, so Jerusalem came back to the land on this date. When you count 52 years from June 7th, 1967, 52 years would be June 7th, 2019. But that's the beginning of the 52nd year. He talks about the completion. In Daniel 9, he talks about the completion to the desolations. So when you finish the 52nd year, it'll be June 7th, 2020. And what date is that? Didn't we just all look at that earlier? It's the same date the Noah story started. June 7th, evening of June 7th to evening of June 8th. The Daniel 9 story, the Noah story, started on the exact same date. I want the magnitude of this to hit everybody right now as I'm teaching this. The Daniel 9:2 prophecy has come true in your lifetime. Everybody hearing my voice, everybody watching this video right now, you are a witness unto the fact that the Daniel 9:2 prophecy has come true. On June 7th, 2020, Jerusalem did in fact complete 52 years in the land of Israel. This prophecy has taken place. Undeniable fact, and it starts the exact same day as the Noah story. And the interesting thing about this is, what else do we have that I've been talking about since the beginning of this teaching that I've been doing? So if the Daniel 9 prophecy came true on June 7th, what's the last day of our prophecy that we're looking for? 7th month, 24th day. Isn't this the Daniel 10 prophecy? When Daniel saw Jesus Christ on the 7th month, 24th day, is it possible, brothers and sisters, that since the Daniel 9 prophecy came true, is it possible that the Daniel 10 prophecy will come true on November 9th, 7th month, 24th day, when Jesus Christ will appear on the earth? And we're not talking about this as his second coming. There's been some questions about that. What we teach in this ministry is Jesus Christ will be here for 40 days starting from this date. And why is that? Because in Luke, he says, and you can look this up, Jesus Christ says he will be here as the sign of Jonah. And the sign of Jonah was what? Jonah walked through Nineveh for 40 days. And there's more in Luke regarding this prophecy. Jesus Christ himself said he would be here as the sign of Jonah during this 40-day period. So this is where we're getting it from. So it's very possible that since the Daniel 9 prophecy came true, the Daniel 10 prophecy will also come true on this date. And I see no reason why it wouldn't. So now getting back to scripture as to what we're going to be showing you now, this brand new revelation that Jamie found, and I have to give Jamie all the credit for it because she's the one that found it. So this is the beginning here. It talks about the 70 years until the desolations of Jerusalem, and he understood it by the 52 books, which we just showed you. So that brings it to June 7th as the start, just like the Noah story was the start on June 7th. So what did Jamie find? Let's take a look at this. Jamie went down here to verse 926, and it says, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. Okay, so what is this really saying? And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. So Jamie took a look at this, and she wanted to see what's the actual Hebrew words that it's actually saying. So what she did was this. I'll just walk you through what she did. She went to the Blue Letter Bible, and she got the same verse, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. Okay, same verse. And she kind of took pieces of it, and I'll show it to you right here. We'll just take that first piece of it, and we'll see what it says. And we put it in the Google Translator under Yiddish. And it says, and after the 70. So it begins with, and after the 70. Isn't that what it told us up here? That he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem? That he would accomplish means to finish, right? To finish. He would finish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. And when you come down here to 926, and then you go ahead and have that translated, the first part of it, it says, and after 70. This is confirming what it says in Daniel 9:2, the accomplishment of 70 years. So let's go back to the rest of that verse. What does the rest of it say? Let's take it from the beginning, all the way over, and we'll copy that into the Google Translator. And let me put that in there. And we'll paste that in. It's not pasting. Let me see what I did wrong. Just 1 second, folks. Let's see, we'll copy that and we'll paste it this time. Hopefully it'll work. There we go. And after the 62 weeks, you shall know Christ. It doesn't talk about cutting him off. And after the 70, and so after the 70 years, and after the 62 weeks, you shall know Christ. Can you imagine that this is actually what it says? Let's go and see if we can't make some sense of this and put it all together. And I have that on a little spreadsheet here to put all together for everybody. So this is what we have, okay? It's talking about a 70-year period, and it's talking about a 62-week period. So we have two calculations here, and we know what it says. It says, and after the 70 and after the 62 weeks, you shall know Christ. So let's lay that out and see where it comes to. Let's go to the Torah calendar. When you go to the Torah calendar, and this is 1949, okay, so we know that before 1949, Israel had a provisional government, but in 1949, March 10th, 1949, they had an official government. So they stood up officially as a government, they stood up officially as a country in 1949. So Tishri 1 in 1949 was on September 24th, first day of the 7th month. So there it is. So now let's go into 70 years. So 70 years plus 1949 will give us 2019, right? So let's see what that brings us. So when is that date? So if we count 70 Tishri 1, 70 years from 1949, Tishri 1, 70 years, it'll bring us to August 31st, 7th month, first day, August 31st. So exactly 70 years. If you count 70 Tishri 1s from 1949 to 2019, it ends up on August 31st, 2019. Okay? So let's calculate that. What was it telling us? Right here. So Tishri 1, 1949 plus 70 years is Tishri 1, 2019, which is August 31st, 2019. So this is the first part of the equation, 70 years. And now let's add the 62 weeks, right? And it says, after 62 weeks, you shall know Christ. So let's add the 62 weeks into that. Let's check the date that it gives us. So we take August 31st, 2019, and we add 62 weeks. And where does it end up? November 7th, 2020, the exact date on our calendar that we're showing right now, November 7th, 2020, the last great 8th day of Tabernacles. It ends up precisely what the scriptures tell us it should end up in. It gives us an exact, I want you to understand the magnitude of this. The calculation brings us to the last day of Tabernacles. And it says what? After the 70 and after the 62 weeks, you shall know Christ. That's what it said. When we go back to this Google Translator, that's what it says. And after the 62 weeks, you shall know Christ. And now we know this date. I want you all to understand what we're showing you. That from that scripture, we can calculate the 70 years, 70 Tishri 1s, brings us to August 31st, 2019, plus 62 weeks. And you shall know Christ. It brings us to exactly on our calendar, on the Enoch Count, the last day of Tabernacles. And you shall know Christ. Is it possible, brothers and sisters, that what we're looking at is the Daniel 9 prophecy being totally fulfilled? In Daniel 9:26 and Daniel 9:27 being totally fulfilled on November 7th, 2020, and you shall know Christ, which we showed in Luke 9:28 is the transfiguration story. And then Daniel 10 says he saw Christ on earth on the 7th month, 24th day of Tishri. This is absolutely shocking. This is absolutely shocking that when you do a precise count from that Daniel 9:26 verse, 70 years and 62 weeks, and you shall know Christ, it's the last great 8th day of Tabernacles. And here's something else very interesting that came up. I want to show everybody. If you count Tishri 24, 1949, it's October 17th, 1949. But this year, October 17th, is Tishri 1. It's almost reversed. It's like in 1949, October 17th was Tishri 24, but this year, Tishri 1, October 17th is Tishri 1. It's kind of reversed. It's in reverse now. So when is Tishri 24 this year? Well, we just showed you Tishri 24, the day when Daniel saw Jesus Christ, is November the 9th. Could this be what Zechariah says in Zechariah 77:5, those 70 years? Because it's not until November 9th, when Tishri 24, the day they made the covenant. Remember, we talked about this. I don't want everyone to lose track. When did they make that hidden fast, that covenant to the Lord? Tishri 24. Tishri 24. And what did the Lord say about that? What did he tell them as far as not fasting in mourning in Zechariah 7:5? Let's get back to that real quick. Speak unto all the people of the land and unto the priests, saying, when ye fasted and mourned in the 5th and 7th month, even those 70 years, did you at all fast unto me? Remember this fast, this hidden fast, this covenant we've been talking about that they made to the Lord? They made it on Tishri 24 to keep these covenants with the Lord. They made this covenant on Tishri 24. And what are we seeing now? It's right here, November 9th. This is the date that they made that covenant. Is it possible, brothers and sisters, that what we're looking at, when we look at this count here, that what we're seeing is Daniel is giving us a precise countdown to Tishri 24, which would be exactly those 70 years they did not keep that covenant to the Lord. They made that covenant on Tishri 24, and that'll be 70 years on November 9th, 2020, in those 70 years, like it says in Zechariah 7:5, when they did not keep that covenant to the Lord. So I want this to impact you. And what we're saying is this. I don't want to confuse anybody. What we're saying is this, that it's possible that the escape date is here, October 31st. Very possible this is the escape date. And then maybe the rest of the world goes through tabernacles and Jesus Christ appears. Or it's possible if we pass October 31, then our next high watch date will definitely be November 7th, when the ark rested, the great 8th day of tabernacle. So we have two high watch dates, October 31 and November 7th. I want everyone to keep in prayer, keep in fast, keep watch. We have two dates that are high watch dates. This one here on October 31st is a really, really high watch date. It's a convergence of all the fast dates, feast dates, all into one date. It's a convergence.
Voici maintenant des extraits d'une vidéo que j'avais produite sur l'enlèvement pouvant possiblement se produire à la dernière journée de la fête des tabernacles. Soyez avertis que malheureusement, le son est mauvais.
Shalom. J'espère que vous allez bien. Cette vidéo se verra être une étude ayant pour but de démontrer que la fête des tabernacles pourrait très bien être la prochaine fête prophétique à se réaliser sur le calendrier de Dieu et que l'enlèvement de l'épouse de Christ y soit attaché. Premièrement, examinons avec attention ce que la menorah pourrait révéler en rapport avec cette fête et les 6 autres de Lévitique 23. Ce chandelier d'or à 7 branches, dont la construction fut prescrite dans le livre de l'Exode, est devenu un des objets sacrés du tabernacle et plus tard du temple de Jérusalem. Il est constitué d'une tige principale montée sur un socle. De chaque côté de cette tige se trouvent 3 branches qui sont soutenues et symétriques 2 à 2 par rapport à la tige centrale. Voyons si ça peut avoir du sens. La première fête, la fête de la Pâque, est en lien direct avec la dernière, celle des tabernacles. La suivante, celle des pains sans levain, serait reliée avec la fête des expiations. Et la troisième, celle des premiers fruits, la résurrection de Jésus, serait liée avec celle de la fête des trompettes. Toutes les flammes sont dirigées vers la flamme centrale, laquelle ne se trouvant pas sur les branches, mais sur le corps même de la menorah. La seule et unique condition pour que ces lampes puissent briller, c'est d'être dirigées vers la branche source. Dans son ensemble, la menorah représente Christ et son Église, allant de l'avant montrant sa lumière. La tige centrale illustre Jésus-Christ avec sa propre fondation, sa trajectoire allant de bas en haut. D'autre part, les branches représentent la vraie Église consacrée qui dépend du cep. La volonté de Dieu est que nous dépendions de lui. De même, les branches ont besoin du cep. La première venue de Jésus s'est produite au printemps. La fête de la Pâque a été la première à être accomplie. Ensuite, La fête des pains sans levain, celle des premiers fruits et de la Pentecôte ont suivi. La fête des premiers fruits ne pouvait pas être la première, suivie des pains sans levain et de la Pâque, parce qu'elle se serait éloignée de la tige centrale. Et donc, tout comme la fête de la Pâque, située à l'extrémité du chandelier, celle des tabernacles, qui est en lien direct avec elle, pourrait être la première des fêtes d'automne à se produire pour la deuxième venue de notre Sauveur. La tradition biblique du chandelier commence au mont Sinaï, après la révélation de Dieu aux Hébreux et la divulgation de la Torah. Dieu demande à Moïse de réaliser un chandelier d'or pur, d'une seule pièce, chandelier devant être placé dans le sein, ou sanctuaire, de la tente de la rencontre, le tabernacle démontable, dans le désert, pour témoigner de la relation permanente et réciproque entre Dieu et son peuple. Voyons maintenant un complément à ce que l'on vient de voir sur la Ménorah. La Pentateuque, ou Torah, est composée de 5 livres qui contiennent l'essentiel de la loi mosaïque. En hébreu, dans le livre de la Genèse, si vous prenez la première lettre, T, et comptez 49 lettres, la prochaine étant la 50e sera O, ensuite R, suivi d'un H. En d'autres mots, après un espace équidistant de 50 lettres, nous obtenons l'appellation du mot Torah. On retrouve le même résultat dans le livre de l'Exode. L'inverse se réalise avec les livres des Nombres et celui de Deutéronome. C'est-à-dire que l'appellation du mot Torah à l'envers en est le résultat. La loi divine a été donnée à Moïse après 50 jours d'Exode et ses séquences pointant vers leur auteur céleste, c'est-à-dire Dieu, avec des sceaux équidistants de 7 lettres. Chaque 8e lettre du livre de Lévitique indique le nom hébreu de Yahweh. Ce code biblique démontre le même principe que celui du chandelier d'or, c'est-à-dire une direction pointant vers le centre et Dieu. Voici maintenant quelques points concernant la fête des tabernacles. Lévitique 23, 39 à 43. Mais le 15e jour du 7e mois, quand vous aurez recueilli le produit de la terre, vous célébrerez une fête à l'Éternel pendant 7 jours. Le premier jour sera un jour de repos, et le 8e sera aussi un jour de repos. Vous demeurerez pendant 7 jours sous des tentes. Tous ceux qui seront nés en Israël demeureront sous des tentes, afin que votre postérité sache que j'ai fait habiter les enfants d'Israël sous des tentes, lorsque je les ai fait sortir du pays d'Égypte. Je suis l'Éternel, votre Dieu. La fête des tabernacles s'étend sur une période de 7 jours, avec une 8e journée attachée à celle-ci. Les temps de tribulation dureront une semaine ou 70 d'années, comme il nous est dit par le prophète Daniel. Le nom de la fête des tabernacles, ou encore Sukkot, tire son origine des tentes ou demeures temporaires dans lesquelles Dieu ordonne à son peuple de séjourner pendant cette fête de 7 jours. Il serait sensé de croire que l'arche de Noé était un parallèle à Sukkot, une habitation temporaire, qui était la tente de Noé. Noé était dans l'arche le premier jour, et Yahweh a dit que les pluies arriveraient dans 7 jours. Cela pourrait-il être interprété comme se produisant le 8e jour? Cette tente commémore l'exode d'Israël hors d'Égypte, mais nous rappelle aussi la nature temporaire de notre vie physique. Et je crois qu'il est juste, aussi longtemps que je suis dans cette tente, de vous réveiller par mes avertissements, sachant que je quitterai bientôt cette tente, comme notre Seigneur Jésus-Christ me l'a fait connaître. Nous le savons, en effet, si notre corps, cette tente que nous habitons sur la terre, vient à être détruit, nous avons au ciel une maison que Dieu nous a préparée, une habitation éternelle qui n'est pas l'œuvre de l'homme. Car dans cette tente, nous gémissons parce que nous attendons, avec un ardent désir, de revêtir, par-dessus ce corps, notre domicile qui est de nature céleste, si, bien sûr, cela se produit tant que nous sommes encore vêtus de notre corps, et non quand la mort nous en aura dépouillés. En effet, nous qui vivons dans cette tente, nous gémissons, accablés, parce que nous voulons, ne pas nous dévêtir, mais revêtir un vêtement par-dessus l'autre. Ainsi, ce qui est mortel sera absorbé par la vie. C'est Dieu lui-même qui nous a destinés à un tel avenir, et qui nous a accordé son esprit comme acompte des biens à venir. Jean 1,14. Et la parole a été faite chair, et a habité parmi nous, pleine de grâce et de vérité, et nous avons contemplé sa gloire, une gloire comme celle du Fils unique venu du Père. Notez que le mot grec, skenoo, pour habiter, est fixer sa tente, avoir son tabernacle, demeurer ou vivre dans un tabernacle ou tente. Matthieu 1, 22-23. Or tout cela arriva afin que s'accomplisse ce que le Seigneur avait dit en ces termes par le prophète. Voici, la Vierge sera enceinte, et elle enfantera un fils, et on le nommera Emmanuel, ce qui signifie Dieu avec nous. Apocalypse 21:3. Et j'entendis une grande voix du ciel qui disait, Voici le tabernacle de Dieu avec les hommes, et il habitera avec eux. Ils seront son peuple, et Dieu sera lui-même avec eux, il sera leur Dieu. La fête des tabernacles est une sainte convocation, une mise à part. Cette période de temps passé dans le désert a eu lieu en raison de leur manque de foi, après que les espions, qui avaient été envoyés en éclaireur dans la terre promise, leur soient revenus avec un mauvais compte-rendu de leur voyage. Mais dans cette expérience, les Israélites devaient être purifiés et épurés avant de pouvoir entrer dans la terre promise. Tous ceux qui avaient plus de 20 ans moururent dans le désert, excepté Josué et Caleb, qui n'avaient pas échoué dans leur foi. Je crois que cette application, Josué et Caleb, représente les vrais croyants, qui échapperont aux tribulations, tandis que le reste du monde périra par manque de foi. Ceci sera pour eux une autre expérience dans le désert, ayant rejeté Yeshua, nom araméen de Jésus qui veut dire sauveur. Ceci s'accomplira lors de l'enlèvement de l'Église, laquelle est actuellement composée en grande partie de non-juifs. Quand ce déplacement de l'Église aura-t-il lieu? Il pourrait se produire à la fête des tabernacles. Comme vous allez le constater, la transfiguration de Matthieu 17 semble être une répétition et un indicateur du temps de l'enlèvement. Dans le récit, Jésus affirma que plusieurs de ses disciples ne goûteraient pas à la mort avant d'avoir vu le Fils de l'homme dans son royaume. Ce même récit dit que 6 jours plus tard, Jésus prit Pierre, Jean et Jacques avec lui pour les amener au sommet d'une autre montagne. Et il fut transfiguré en leur présence. Son visage devint resplendissant comme le soleil et ses habits devinrent éclatants comme la lumière. En même temps, Moïse et Élie leur apparurent, qui s'entretenaient avec lui. Et voici, il vint de la nuée une voix qui dit, « C'est ici mon Fils bien-aimé, en qui j'ai pris plaisir, écoutez-le. » Dans ce même récit, il nous est dit que Pierre dit à Jésus, « Alors Pierre, prenant la parole, dit à Jésus, « Seigneur, il est bon que nous demeurions ici. Si tu veux, faisons-y 3 tentes, une pour toi, une pour Moïse et une pour Élie. » Cette demande de Pierre, cet apôtre, qui s'avéra être un leader dans l'Église future, était une allusion évidente à la fête des tabernacles, qui devait se dérouler dans le même temps à Jérusalem. Et puis Jésus leur donna un commandement. Ne dites pas à personne ce que vous avez vu, jusqu'à ce que le Fils de l'homme soit ressuscité des morts. Cet événement ne devait être rapporté par eux qu'après que la pleine compréhension de cet événement ne leur ait été donnée par le déversement du Saint-Esprit à la Pentecôte. Cet événement constitue donc l'enseignement symbolique au sujet de la glorification et de l'enlèvement des croyants, tel que nous ont révélé plus tard les disciples. Regardez de plus près cette révélation qui nous a été laissée par cet événement concernant la glorification de Jésus dans son royaume. Il nous est dit que cet événement se déroula 6 jours après que Jésus eut annoncé que certains allaient le voir dans son royaume. Cette précision est un indice quant au moment où doit avoir lieu cet événement à venir. Les Écritures nous indiquent qu'un jour pour le Seigneur est comme 1000 ans pour l'homme. Ainsi, selon cette interprétation, la réalisation finale de cette vision ne devrait s'accomplir qu'après 6000 ans d'histoire pour l'humanité. Eh bien, c'est précisément là où nous sommes aujourd'hui, à la fin de 6000 ans d'histoire, nous préparant à entrer dans le 7e millénaire qui marquera, à quelques années près, le début du royaume de Dieu sur la terre. Durant cette vision, 2 hommes étaient avec lui, Moïse et Élie. Ces 2 hommes représentent les croyants de l'âge de l'Église qui seront avec Jésus dans la Nouvelle Jérusalem. Moïse représente les morts en Christ, et Élie représente ceux qui seront vivants et qui demeureront jusqu'à l'avènement, à la rencontre du Seigneur dans les airs. La voix de Dieu se fait entendre au 5e verset, et la voix de Dieu, comme il est mentionné dans d'autres passages, est comme le son d'une trompette. Et c'est au son de la trompette de Dieu que l'enlèvement va se produire. Un autre point intéressant à considérer est que la disparition de Moïse et d'Élie s'est produite à l'extérieur du territoire d'Israël. En effet, Moïse n'a pas été autorisé à entrer dans la terre promise et mourut donc à l'extérieur des limites de ce territoire qui est Israël. De plus, il est intéressant de remarquer qu'Élie a dû franchir le Jourdain pour se rendre exactement à l'emplacement où Moïse avait été vu pour la dernière fois, puis il fut enlevé au ciel vivant sous les yeux d'Élisée. Ils étaient tous 2 des croyants qui avaient dû sortir à l'extérieur du camp d'Israël. Ils sont donc une image de l'Église dont la caractéristique particulière est qu'elle a une forte prédominance pour les croyants de racines non juives. Ainsi, en cela, nous pouvons penser que la transfiguration est une image de la glorification et de l'enlèvement des croyants. Dans l'Apocalypse, Jean est enlevé pour voir les événements qui caractériseront la tribulation, tels qu'ils seront vus à partir du ciel. Il voit alors 24 anciens avec Jésus. Dans les traditions du sacerdoce juif, il y avait 2 prêtres de chaque tribu qui partageaient les fonctions du service du temple tour à tour pour une période d'1 semaine chacun. Il y avait seulement 3 occasions où tous les prêtres étaient assemblés pour servir ensemble. Ces 3 occasions étaient lors de la fête de la Pâque, de la Pentecôte et naturellement lors de la fête des Tabernacles. Ceci pourrait également être pour nous un indice quant à l'époque où Jean fut transporté au ciel et qui sera le jour de notre enlèvement futur. 1 Roi 8.2. Et tous les hommes d'Israël s'assemblèrent auprès du roi Salomon au mois d'Étanim, qui est le 7e mois pendant la fête. Le mot Étanim signifie plus constante. C'est le 7e mois juif, correspondant à la période d'octobre à novembre. Au jour où le premier temple a été construit par Salomon, quand le temple fut dédicacé, la gloire de Dieu, la Shekinah, l'Esprit de Dieu remplit le temple. Cet événement eut lieu à la fête des Tabernacles au 7e mois. Le 2e temple a également été consacré à la fête des Tabernacles. Les 2 fois où le temple a été consacré furent donc lors de la fête des Tabernacles. À cause du mois de décalage, la lune serait pleine à la fête des Tabernacles le 23-24 octobre, 15 de Tishri selon le calendrier juif, tel que je l'ai expliqué lors de la vidéo précédente. La lune est également un symbole de l'Église parce que celle-ci ne possède par sa nature aucune lumière par elle-même. La lune réfléchit la lumière du soleil, symbole de Jésus-Christ. Et comme la lune, à l'époque de cette fête, est pleine, elle reflète pleinement la lumière du soleil. L'Église sera élevée à la face du Seigneur pour être définitivement éclairée de sa plénitude et glorifiée par l'éclat de son avènement. Contrairement à ce que j'ai toujours dit dans mes vidéos et pensées, nulle part n'est-il dit expressément que la dernière trompette de 1 Corinthiens 15-52 soit liée à la fête des trompettes. Cette position est basée sur des enseignements rabbiniques. Je révise donc ma position basée sur des écrits bibliques. En fait, des trompettes sont sonnées aux fêtes et aux mémoriaux bibliques. Aussi, dans vos jours de joie, dans vos fêtes solennelles et au commencement de vos mois, vous sonnerez des trompettes sur vos holocaustes et sur vos sacrifices de prospérité, et elles vous serviront de mémorial devant votre Dieu. Je suis l'Éternel, votre Dieu. Étant donné que les 7 fêtes de l'Éternel sont observées sur un cycle de 7 mois, débutant avec celle de la Pâque et se terminant avec celle des Tabernacles, pourquoi est-ce que la dernière trompette ne serait-elle pas sonnée à la dernière fête de ce cycle? Psaume 81, 4 et 5. Sonnez la trompette à la nouvelle lune, à la pleine lune, au jour de notre fête. Car c'est une loi pour Israël, une ordonnance du Dieu de Jacob. Le passage dans les psaumes fait référence à la fête des trompettes, laquelle est une fête comportant une nouvelle lune, et à la fête des Tabernacles, laquelle est une fête avec une pleine lune. Et comme nous l'avons vu plus tôt, les lampes aux extrémités de la menorah sont unies l'une à l'autre, pouvant ainsi nous indiquer que la fête de la Pâque est connectée avec celle des Tabernacles, un jour de pleine lune. Ces 2 fêtes sont les seules qui sont célébrées le jour de la pleine lune. La fête des Tabernacles est la dernière des fêtes agricoles précédées des premiers fruits et de la Pentecôte. Jésus aura-t-il établi un modèle en ressuscitant à une fête agricole, celle des premiers fruits? Est-ce que la résurrection future de notre corps à l'enlèvement pourrait survenir également lors d'une de ces prochaines fêtes agricoles? Alors que l'Église a vu son commencement à la fête de la Pentecôte, il serait plausible que sa moisson se produise à la fin de la saison agricole. Jean 4,35. Ne dites-vous pas qu'il y a encore 4 mois jusqu'à la moisson? Voici, je vous le dis, levez vos yeux et regardez les campagnes qui blanchissent déjà pour la moisson. Jean 7, 6 à 14. Jésus leur dit, « Mon temps n'est pas encore venu, mais votre temps est toujours venu. Le monde ne peut vous haïr, mais il me haït, parce que je rends de lui le témoignage que ses œuvres sont mauvaises. Pour vous, montez à cette fête. Pour moi, je n'y monte pas encore, parce que mon temps n'est pas encore venu. » Et leur ayant dit cela, il demeura en Galilée. Mais, lorsque ses frères furent partis, il monta aussi à la fête, non pas publiquement, mais comme en cachette. Les Juifs donc le cherchaient pendant la fête et disaient, « Où est-il? » Et il y avait une grande rumeur à son sujet parmi le peuple. Les uns disaient, « C'est un homme de bien », et les autres disaient, « Non, mais il séduit le peuple. » Toutefois, personne ne parlait librement de lui par crainte des Juifs. Vers le milieu de la fête, Jésus monta au temple et il enseignait. Il existe un lien évident dans ce passage entre Jésus, la fête des tabernacles et l'enlèvement. Car, comme l'enlèvement, cet événement se déroulera non pas publiquement, mais comme en cachette. Deux choses significatives se sont déroulées à la 8e journée de la vie de Jésus. Luc 2, 21. Quand les 8 jours furent accomplis pour circoncire l'enfant, il fut appelé Jésus, nom qui lui avait été donné par l'ange avant qu'il fût conçu dans le sein de sa mère. 1. Son nom lui fut donné. 2. Il fut circoncis. La circoncision est un signe de l'alliance abrahamique que Dieu a fait avec les Juifs. Pourrait-il y avoir une connexion entre ceci et l'Église de Philadelphie? Philadelphie est une Église à qui Dieu promet de la garder hors des tribulations. Ses membres sont associés à ceux qui vont participer à l'enlèvement. Apocalypse 3.12. Celui qui vaincra, je ferai de lui une colonne dans le temple de mon Dieu, et il n'en sortira plus, et j'écrirai sur lui le nom de mon Dieu, et le nom de la cité de mon Dieu, de la nouvelle Jérusalem, qui descend du ciel, d'auprès de mon Dieu, et au nouveau nom. Le nom de Dieu sera inscrit sur ceux et celles qui auront vaincu. Cela pourrait signifier un signe de notre alliance éternelle avec Dieu. Se pourrait-il qu'on le reçoive à la 8e journée de la fête des tabernacles? Jésus a prêché pendant 3 ans et demi, terminant son ministère par sa mort sur la croix à la Pâque. 3 ans et demi plus tôt nous ramène précisément à la fête des tabernacles. Finalement, il est mentionné que les membres de cette Église seront des colonnes dans le temple de Dieu. Chacune des pierres vivantes seront rassemblées ensemble dans le temple de Dieu. Éphésiens 2, 19 à 22. Ainsi, vous n'êtes plus ni des étrangers, ni des gens de dehors, mais concitoyens des saints et de la maison de Dieu, étant édifiés sur le fondement des apôtres et des prophètes, dont Jésus-Christ est la pierre angulaire, en qui tout l'édifice, bien coordonné, s'élève pour être un temple saint au Seigneur, en qui aussi vous êtes édifiés ensemble pour être la maison de Dieu par l'Esprit.